14 Haziran'da sinemalarda.
Start of the movie, a sorcerer named Hira warns Meral about the dangers of the zolar ritual, a practice so feared that scholars avoid even naming it. Performed during months without a full moon, its peak, the night of Zulmat, occurs on the new moon, symbolizing ultimate darkness and cruelty. She calls the approaching night an omen, but urges caution, as the curse is irreversible. Meral vows to inflict the same pain on those who killed her son and husband, even if it damns her, to which Hira urges her to repent, saying she will find a sacrifice. Hira explains that on the night of Zulmat, they will perform the ritual with a sacrifice, and the following night, after her wishes are fulfilled, Meral must bury the sacrifice alive. Hira asks if she is willing to commit such a grave sin, to which Meral agrees, saying she has no other choice, and Hira instructs her to find a sacrifice and bring them the next night. On Friday, February 16, 2018, during the night of Zulmat, Hira performs the ritual. As she begins chanting, strange things start happening to the boy, and her eyes take on a demonic appearance. Under the ritual's influence, a man enters his house with a gun and murders his entire family one by one, before shooting himself. The boy eventually loses consciousness, and Hira tells Meral that the Zulmat ritual has succeeded. However, she explains that one final step remains. Meral must bury the boy alive the following night, insisting she will bear the burden of this great sin alone. She further reveals that the boy is now infected with demon blood, and warns Meral that if she refuses to go through with it, her suffering will be far worse than anything she has endured so far. Hira then hands Meral a cursed amulet made from the bones of 7 animals, instructing her to put it in the sack and bury it alongside the kid, explaining that this amulet is the seal of Zulmat. On Wednesday, March 21, 2018, Meral visits Arzu's house to interview for a maid's job. Arzu explains that they need someone to live with them, as her elderly mother-in-law, Lale, diagnosed with Alzheimer's 2 years ago, requires more care than she can manage. Meral expresses her support, assuring Arzu that she will handle everything. Arzu mentions that they have 2 daughters. The elder, Serap, is 18 and feeling a bit anxious since moving away from her friends. Just then, Arzu's younger daughter, Rüya, comes there. Arzu introduces her to Meral, who gives Rüya a lollipop, and Rüya thanks her politely before leaving. Meral comments on Rüya's beauty, wishing her good fortune, and Arzu reveals that Rüya survived a severe illness. She asks Meral to pay special attention to her, and Meral reassures Arzu, saying she is great with children and will take excellent care of her. Rüya goes to her grandmother's room and asks, "How are you?" To which she replies, "Your dad told me everything, and he regrets it deeply, but he can't say anything because he's afraid." Rüya says, "You'll get better," but Lale tells her to go away, saying someone else made her. That night, Meral feeds Lale and introduces herself, but Lale warns her there's no room, claiming her son and daughter-in-law will eat all the food and leave her to starve. When Meral suggests not bothering her son, Lale mutters about the importance of timing, approaches a painting, and ominously adds, "If you're late, the price will be heavy." She then opens the bathroom door, repeating the same lines, and glances inside before turning to Meral, asking, "Isn't that right?" Terrified, Meral stays silent as Lale mentions her young granddaughter upstairs, insisting Meral tell her not to come, claiming, "She's not my granddaughter." Meral tries to calm her, but Lale asks, "Why did you come?" and tells her to leave. After Meral leaves, Lale faces the mirror and whispers, "He killed her, and he doesn't know what he has done." Meanwhile, Serap tells Rüya, "You're lucky you're not interested in anything, and you don't care where you are, what you see, or what you go through. Nothing makes you unhappy. You're always the same. And sometimes, I wish I were like you." But Rüya responds, "You wouldn't want to be in my place." Later, Arzu tells Kamal that Serap still hasn't gotten used to this place, to which Kamal replies, "They've just arrived, and she'll make friends here too." He adds that he plans to clear his head and look for a job at a bigger hospital nearby. Arzu says she thought he wasn't going to do this anymore, asking why he quit his job if he is just going to become a doctor again, to which Kamal tells her to understand him, saying he just needed some time off. Meanwhile, Meral gazes at her family photos, a deep sadness overtaking her. And in a flashback, we see a man shooting her husband and son, the memory haunting her as she relives the painful moment. As she places the photo on the mirror, her son appears and accuses her of breaking her promise. Hira says she will, then turns her head towards the boy, and then they all disappear. Later that night, Kemal fills a glass from a jug filled with blood. He places one end of a pipe into a glass and sucks the blood from the other end. As he fills another glass, he calls Arzu over. She comes and sits next to him, and he asks where Rüya is, to which she replies that she is taking a bath. Kamal says he will go check and ask Arzu to take care of this, expecting her to unload this in the others until he gets back. He goes to the bathroom and is shocked by what he sees, and Lale tells him that he shouldn't have done that. He asks, "What happened?" And she responds that he's gone crazy again after the killing, and no one knows whose blood this is. Kamal tries to wake Rüya, but Lale says, "Kill me too." Just then, Rüya appears from behind, and Kamal is shocked to see it's the boy in her arms. He suddenly wakes up from the nightmare, and Arzu asks him what happened, but he remains silent, still in shock. Meanwhile, Serap asks Rüya if she likes the new woman, to which Rüya asks, "Why?" And Serap explains that the woman gets on her nerves, always smiling and asking, "Do you want anything?" She says, her actions seem fake, to which Rüya says she likes her, but Serap warns her not to get too comfortable, reminding her that the woman just works here. After this, both of them go to sleep, but after a while, Serap calls out to Rüya. Rüya asks, "What is it?" and turns around, but Serap just keeps calling her name. Confused, Rüya gets up to check on her and cautiously approaches her, and Serap tells her to leave her alone, saying she doesn't want her to stay in this room. Scared, Rüya moves closer, removes her blanket, and Serap asks, "What is it? Can you leave me alone?" Meanwhile, Orhan reads about the Black Moon, which occurs every 19 years, and Zulmat darkness will fall upon us. The sacrifice will be made, the curse will be fulfilled. As he reads, he wonders, what kind of curse, and what kind of evil is this? Suddenly, Hira's demonic face appears, followed by visions of the rituals she performed for Meral. The jinn warns Orhan to stay away, saying he cannot escape if he gets involved. But Orhan challenges the jinn, claiming its fear brought it to him, and commands it to leave. Afterward, Orhan reads that failing to complete the ritual will spread the curse and darkness to the innocent. The next day, Rüya asks Arzu if she can sleep in the other room, saying she wants to be alone, to which Arzu agrees to talk to her sister, and then leaves. Meanwhile, in Yildirim, Bursa, some children are sitting in a room when a man named Kazim enters, scolds them, and tells them to get up and bring him some money. He then approaches Samet and asks if he sent someone after Meral. Samet confirms he did, and Kazim says Meral gave everything she had to find that man. He warns Samet to be careful, advising him not to let this maniac get them into trouble. Samet says Meral would have buried Mehmet alive if the children hadn't informed them, to which Kazim says the situation worked in their favor, and tells Samet to go after Meral while he plans to pay a visit to the fugitive doctor sometime. Meanwhile, Kamal presents 2 dolls to Rüya, saying one represents her and the other represents Mehmet. Rüya thanks him, and Kamal tells her to never separate them, to which she says, "Okay." After he leaves, Meral approaches Rüya and asks why she wanted to sleep alone, to which Rüya responds that her sister is acting weird. Meral asks how so, and Rüya explains that her sister whispers her name at night. Meral suggests Sirp must have been joking and adds that her own sister used to do the same to her. Later, Lale tells Meral that he broke his promise. Meral asks, "Who?" And Lale says her loser husband, explaining that he said he would never leave her. But he didn't keep his promise, and now he is burning in hell. She says, "Promises must be kept, and too bad if you don't." She then takes the spoon from her hand and drops it on the floor, and when Meral bends to pick it up, she is horrified to see Lale, who asks, "Isn't that right?" But in the next moment, Meral realizes that Lale is normal again, and is simply asking her what her name is, and whether she will come again. That night, Rüya goes to Serap, but Serap tells her to go away, saying she wanted to sleep alone. "So go to her bed." Rüya says she's scared and asks, "Can I come to you?" Frustrated, Serap turns to her, but is horrified to see Rüya covered in blood. Rüya suddenly jumps on her, and Serap wakes up from the nightmare. However, she then hears Rüya's voice from the other room, saying she's scared and asking her to come to her. Concerned, Serap goes to Rüya's room and finds her sitting in a corner, trembling and saying she's so scared. The door suddenly slams shut, and she watches in horror as Rüya stands up and begins to grow larger. As she approaches her, panicking, Serap tries to open the door, but she is back in her own room, waking up abruptly from the sound of someone trying to open her door. Moments later, Rüya enters, looking frightened, and says, "I'm so scared," and asks, "Can I come to you?" Rüya approaches Serap, saying, "It's me," and embraces her, saying, "Don't be afraid." Meanwhile, Meral has a vivid and unsettling dream in which she sees strange scenes reminiscent of the ritual night. Rüya's dolls, a demonic Hira sitting with Rüya, Mehmet, and Lale's lifeless body. Suddenly, Hira and Lale haunt her, jolting her awake in terror. As she turns on the lights, she hears Hassan's voice saying, "They won't leave me alone. Keep your promise and bury him." He adds, "She is already sick, so there's no need to feel sorry for her." Disturbed, Meral comes outside when suddenly she feels someone touch her. But when she looks around, no one is there. Soon after, she feels the touch again, and then she hears Hassan's voice once more, calling her name. She is then grabbed by Hassan, who tells her that she broke her promise, and then points her toward Mehmet, who disappears the next moment. Later, Kamal wakes his mother and asks her, "Would you give your life for Rüya?" Confused, she asks, "Who is Rüya?" To which he reminds her that Rüya is her granddaughter. Layla says, "You've tried so hard with her," and Kamal tells her, "You have to die for Rüya to live." Lale replies, "Kill me and Mehmet too." And Kamal asks, "How do you know about Mehmet?" To which she calmly says, "He came here and told me." She then tells Kamal it's time for him to go crazy, and Kamal, saying, "I am going crazy," wraps a pipe around her neck. As he tightens it, he says, "If we could have gotten your blood, everything would have been fine, but it just doesn't work." He then leads her up the stairs and suddenly pushes her down. However, he abruptly wakes up and realizes it was only a nightmare. He quickly rushes to his mother's room to check on her, and seeing that she is fine, he leaves. He returns to his bed, and just as he lies down, he hears Lale calling his name, prompting him to rush back to check on her. But when he enters her room, he finds it empty. Meanwhile, Lale is seen ascending the stairs, and when Kamal reaches there, he finds her standing at the top, and before he can react, she falls down the stairs, dying right in front of him. The next day, Meral offers condolences to Arzu and explains she told Rüya that her grandmother had a small accident and was taken to the hospital. Arzu goes to Rüya and asks why she was crying, to which Rüya says, "Grandma loved me very much when I was little, and she used to say, 'You are my most precious possession,' but she stopped loving me after I got sick." Arzu reassures her that she still loves her, but sometimes, as people grow older, they become forgetful. Rüya says, "But she told me to go away and never come back, and that Dad turned her into someone else." She asks, "Why would she say that?" To which Arzu remains silent. That night, Kazim finds Kamal and demands the 2 million he previously asked for, adding that once he gets it, they'll never have to see each other again. Kamal says he already gave him everything, to which Kazim says, "You should have been more careful," and then he leaves. During dinner, Kamal tells Serap to put her phone down, but she snaps back, "Can't you see I'm chatting?" Angered, he orders her to put it down or go to her room, adding, "At least behave properly today." When Arzu intervenes, he insists Serap will walk all over them otherwise. Serap fires back, blaming him for dragging them to this house and shouting, "I keep having nightmares." Last night, Rüya came to me, scared, asking to sleep with me, but by morning, she was gone, and she claimed she never came. Arzu warns her she's scaring Rüya, but Serap yells, "It's always about Rüya," and storms off. Arzu follows to calm her, while Kamal sits frustrated, and Rüya then says, "I never went to Serap. She's lying." Meanwhile, Meral sits in her room, lost in thought, recalling the things Hira had told her, and in a flashback, we see her burying Mehmet alive. Kazim and Samet arrive at the scene, where Kazim threatens Meral, saying, "If anything happens to this kid, I'll bury you right here." On the other hand, Samet tells a boy named Rüya that the money he begged for all day isn't even enough for his food. He grabs a rod, telling Rüya to raise his hand, but as Samet strikes, Mehmet grabs the rod and stabs him with it. As Samet collapses, Mehmet looks at him and asks, "Why did you save me?" Meanwhile, Rüya is sleeping in her room when she hears Lale calling out to her, and as she turns around, Lale tells her, "I'm dead, but they didn't tell you, so you wouldn't be sad." She tells Rüya that she is not at the hospital, but in the grave. Lale then approaches Rüya, saying no one will hear you, and then grabs her leg, saying, "I got you," and suddenly, everything returns to normal. Meral rushes in, asking what happened, and Arzu and Kamal follow behind her. Rüya asks her mom, "Did Grandma come back from the hospital?" To which Arzu says no, and Rüya says, "But Grandma told me she's dead." Arzu suggests she sleep with them tonight, but Rüya asks, "Can I sleep with Meral?" Later, Kamal remembers his mother accusing him of killing the boy for nothing and shamelessly speaking of it. She questions why he told her and reminds him that Meral is there because of him. Kamal then goes to the spot where his mother died, and when he looks up, he sees her face. Suddenly, he hears Rüya telling Mehmet that her dad bought him the doll. Perplexed, he moves towards the sound and is horrified to find his family sitting with Mehmet. He enters the room, laughing, and as they look at him, he asks, "What choice did I have?" He steps forward and asks Arzu to tell him, "What would you do?" Shouting, he says, "Don't look at me like that," explaining that I couldn't find anything else. He begs them to say something, pleading, "Don't leave me alone." He continues, "Two kids, one will die and one will live," and asks, "Which one would you choose?" He insists, "Anyone would have done what I did, and no father could have decided differently." Frustrated, he screams, and as Hira screams, he wakes up from the nightmare, breathing heavily. He wakes Arzu, telling her they need to talk, and admits that he can't hide the truth any longer. She asks what he's saying, and he confesses that he has done something terrible, and reveals that he killed a child, but he had no choice. Arzu is shocked, and he continues, explaining that he didn't stop when he should have after taking the boy's blood. He crossed the line by giving more blood to their daughter to save her, which ultimately led to the child's death. But he insists that any father would have done the same. Just then, Rüya enters the room and asks Kamal what happened. Arzu calls her over, reassuring her that everything is okay, then turns to Kamal and asks if he did it for this little squirt. Kamal is terrified as Rüya says yes, he did it for me, and suddenly her mother appears, agreeing that Kamal did it for his dear daughter. Kamal is horrified to see his family, along with Mehmet, as they all repeat that he did it for his dear daughter. But after a moment, everyone vanishes, and he finds Arzu sleeping in bed. Meanwhile, Meral sits in Rüya's room when Kazim calls, asking what she's doing in the house. She says she works as a maid and looks after the children, but Kazim accuses her of nearly killing the child she kidnapped, claiming he saved him. Meral insists it's over, but Kazim asks if she paid him to dig into the doctor just to play maid. He reminds her that Mehmet is dead and warns that if she interferes again, he'll kill her. Kazim then says he'll arrive in 2 hours and demands she meet him outside. In a flashback, Hira asks Meral why didn't she tell her, reminding her that she had warned her the price would be heavy. Meral admits that she didn't know what to do, to which Hira asks if they had to haunt her to make her come to her senses. She then tells Meral that the boy is dead, and the man who killed him has a daughter. Hira says Meral needs to find her, as her sacrifice is her now, and warns her that she doesn't have much time. Hira suddenly appears behind Meral, scaring her, and to her horror, she watches as a cabinet shakes violently. Trembling, Meral approaches the cabinet and opens the drawer, revealing the amulet inside, and the amulet suddenly moves, reminding her of Hira's words that when the time comes, the amulet will warn her. Meanwhile, Kazim spots a group of kids blocking his way, causing him to stop the car. He steps out of the vehicle, and upon recognizing that the kids work for him, he asks who brought them here. Suddenly, the door of his car slams shut, and the kids begin pelting stones at him. Crying out in pain, Kazim stumbles towards his car and manages to get inside. But as he attempts to engage the gear, Mehmet grabs his hand and stares at him with a sinister smile, and the scene abruptly cuts to black. Meanwhile, Kamal is shocked to find blood transfer bags in his washroom, but they vanish in an instant. He goes to his mother's room and asks for forgiveness. confessing that he knows he caused everything, and that it all happened because of him. He wishes he could have been a better son to her and regrets killing her. As he speaks, he finds her hair under the pillow and breaks down, crying manically. Just then, Rüya and Mehmet appear, startling him. They leave, telling him that killing doesn't work. Kemal follows them, and they lead him to a room whose walls are covered in pages from satanic books. On a mattress in the center, he sees amulets and dolls of Rüya and Mehmet. Suddenly, a large doll falls, startling him, and he hears a voice coming from outside the room. Kamal steps out to find his family watching a video of his confession. In it, he admits to taking blood from a boy named Mehmet to save Rüya, explaining her illness required constant transfusions, and finding donors became impossible. Desperate, he struck a deal with a gang trafficking orphan children, paying for Mehmet's blood, which saved Rüya but caused the boy's death. Later, blackmailed by the gang and racked with guilt, he fled, justifying his actions for Rüya's sake. Haunted by nightmares and hallucinations, he imagined confessing to Arzu. Moments ago, he saw Rüya holding hands with Mehmet and followed them into this room. Now, in the video, he watches himself say, "This room is empty, and there's no one here but me." Kemal says, "I went crazy," and falls down, screaming, "I went crazy." Arzu wakes up to the sound of screams, and as she turns on the light, the lamp falls, startling her. Frightened, she climbs down from the bed and hears someone humming. Following the sound, she is shocked to see Rüya sitting at the door, who raises her head and ominously says that she will die tonight and join her grandmother. Confused, Arzu asks what she means, to which she responds, "I'm not Rüya, and you're losing your mind." She tells Arzu to look behind her, promising it will scare her even more. And before she can react, the jinn attacks and possesses Arzu, causing her to collapse to the floor. Later, the possessed Arzu enters Serap's room and forces its hand into her mouth, possessing her as well. Meanwhile, Meral is horrified to see Arzu and Serap, who ominously declares that Rüya will die tonight. Meral approaches Rüya and asks, "Shall we play a game?" When Rüya asks what kind, Meral explains they'll go to the garden, where Rüya will climb into a hole she dug. But first, she must let her tape her mouth and cover her head with a sack. Meral leads Rüya to the garden, declaring it as their playground. And meanwhile, as Orhan arrives near their house, the jinn warns him not to get involved, taunting him not to look at that door. The door then creaks open, and the jinn sneers, "If you want to interfere, come and meet your death." Orhan enters the house and finds Serap and Arzu in a room. Meanwhile, Meral prepares Rüya to be buried, and Orhan asks Jinn who it is and why it possesses the girls' bodies. The jinn glares at him and warns, "I told you to stay away, and who I am is none of your business." Just then, the jinn possessing Arzu begins to laugh menacingly, but Orhan declares that he won't leave until he puts an end to this evil. He asks Jinn to tell him who it is, to which Jinn says, "You are helpless and weak, and you have no right to question me." The jinn possessing Arzu turns to him and asks, "Don't you know what you are after?" It approaches him, asking, "Don't you know what you are getting into?" And then asks, "How dare you come here?" Orhan responds, "I won't leave until I bring light to this darkness," and then commands the jinn to give him its name and why it is possessing their bodies. The jinn counters, "Are you ready to face the darkness of humanity?" And Orhan replies, "I am familiar with the darkness of people." Jinn laughs mockingly as it reveals its name, Asfara. Orhan seizes their throats and begins reciting prayers, and after a tense moment, he is transported to Jinn's realm. There, Orhan asks, "What is the cause of this dark evil?" To which Jinn replies, "A man who killed a son and a father for a handful of land. Men who force innocent children to work and then sell them. A woman who summoned a ritual to kill her enemy's family for revenge. And a mad father who murdered another child to keep his own child alive." Orhan protests, "The child has done nothing wrong and you have no right to do this." But Jinn retorts, "No descendant of that wicked father can be innocent, and that sacrifice belongs to us." Orhan asks, "What is the sin of that innocent child?" And Jinn answers, "She was offered to us as part of a deal with a cursed sorcerer." Orhan says, "We belong to God. We come from him. We will go to him, and you have no power over that innocent. Jinn begins to chant something, prompting Orhan to start praying to God. This continues for some time, until Orhan reveals an amulet, declaring, "I banish you to the darkest pit of Siccin." He finally manages to expel the jinn from their bodies with great effort. Meanwhile, Meral has already buried Rüya, but Hassan's spirit appears and tells her she didn't need to do that. Meral quickly digs Rüya out and tells her the game is over, praising her for playing it very well. Kamal sits crying, staring at his mother's hair, when she suddenly appears and says, "Give me my hair!" She scolds him, saying it's a shame and that he shouldn't have killed, as killing doesn't work. Rüya then enters the scene, and Lale tells Kamal that Rüya isn't the one who is sick, he is. Kamal defends himself, insisting that anyone would have done the same, and the scene shifts, revealing that he is still alone in the room. Meral, Arzu, Serap, and Rüya still live together in the same house. It was revealed that Rüya did not have any illness, and that her father Kamal was trying to make his daughter look sick to his family due to his psychological disorder. Kamal has completely lost his sanity. He has been undergoing treatment for 6 years. This movie was written based on what Meral has said.